Welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. It's 9 p.m. over here. It's 2 in the morning in Beijing, China, and 2 in the afternoon in Washington, D.C. Wherever you're joining us from, welcome. We've got plenty of content all the way from Cairo to Johannesburg, Lagos, and Nairobi. There's plenty of it in the next 30 minutes. Here's what's coming up. Police in Malawi arrested chief suspect in the multi-million-dollar Cashgate scandal. We'll have an update. A fund set up by the Egyptian president is off to an encouraging start. $1.5 billion is in the bank. And the world's top platinum producer is planning to sell off some of its assets in South Africa. Is it a good deal? Find out shortly. First, though, some news not from Africa. An update, really, on the Malaysian Airlines crash in the Ukraine. The American President Barack Obama has urged the Russian President Vladimir Putin to force pro-Russian separatists to stop blocking an international investigation into the shooting down of a passenger jet, a Boeing 777, last week. In remarks at the White House, President Obama said Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine have kept investigators away from the site of the downed Malaysian Airlines aircraft, at times even firing the weapons into the air. Obama said President Putin and Russia have a direct responsibility to compel the separatists that they support to cooperate in the investigation, and the burden, he says, is now on Moscow to insist that separatists stop tampering with the investigation. In the meantime, other reports do say a Ukrainian train carrying bodies from the site of that particular plane crash has left the station of the town of Terez. Officials say the train will head off to Kharkiv, but there's no official confirmation of that. We'll continue to get you updates on this developing story in subsequent bulletins.
Our immediate focus is on recovering those who were lost, investigating exactly what happened, and putting forward the facts. We have to make sure that the truth is out and that accountability exists. Now, international investigators are on the ground. They have been organized. I've sent teams. Other countries have sent teams. They are prepared. They are organized to conduct what should be the kinds of protocols and scouring and collecting of evidence that should follow any international incident like this. And what they need right now is immediate and full access to the crash site.
Let's now move to Malawi, where the police have arrested Oswald Lutepo. He's the chief suspect in a systematic plunder of government revenue that's more popularly known in that country as the Cashgate scandal. He's previously alleged that senior government officials were behind those events in which businessmen allegedly plotted with civil servants and politicians to swindle the government through fraudulent payments for goods and services that were not actually delivered. According to the police prosecutor, Lutepo was arrested for perjury. Now, local newspapers report that he was threatened into implicating some senior government officials in the former President Joyce Banda's administration while shielding others. Lutepo claims he was warned that should he refuse to play along, he would be implicated in the shooting of the former budget director. Elsewhere, the World Bank says its financing commitments in infrastructure projects has gone up by 45% in the year to date to over $24 billion from $16.7 in 2013. Now, that's the highest level of lending by the group since 2011, with the bulk of investments focused on energy and transport. The World Bank President Jim Yong Kim says that the group plans to expand funding to developing countries in order to provide clean drinking water to millions and boost electricity consumption as well. He also welcomed the announcement this week of a BRICS Development Bank and talks around an Asian infrastructure investment bank. He says if those two institutions eventually do provide more funding for infrastructure, it just creates a win-win scenario. Now then, the Long Live Egypt Fund, which was created to gather funds to boost efforts to revive the economy of the North African country, has raised over $1.5 billion just 2 weeks after its launch. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi launched the fund, which essentially enables citizens, national and foreign entities to donate money that will help the country get through its current economic crisis. Now, according to the Egyptian Central Bank, most of the donations came from private investors in the banking sector and wealthy businessmen in Egypt as well. The government has welcomed the contributions, but it says more are needed.
نص ما أمتلكه.
I am donating half my wealth and half my monthly salary indefinitely to Egypt. I am not doing any favors. This is my duty as an Egyptian to my country.
Huge projects should be established using this money. It will employ thousands of people. It will develop poor areas and be profitable. The revenue should be reinvested in other projects, and so the whole economy benefits.
Many of us don't have enough to donate, but it's a good idea. We hope it helps the poor.
Right then, so that's the broad details of the fund, but how exactly does it work? Let's find out. Rami Mofta is on the board of Synergy Capital Markets, is live with us right now from Cairo. Mr. Mofta, thank you for your time this evening. Exactly how is this fund structured? Is it a trust? Is it a government entity? What exactly is it?
Right now, what it is a bank account that was established by presidential decree through the Central Bank of Egypt. And the aim was to collect funds from private and foreign funds in order to invest to improve the Egyptian economy and Egypt as a whole. Now, it does not have a formal entity structure per se yet, but there are many speculations as to how it's going to be established. All we know right now is that it is directly controlled by the Egyptian president, that they have already established a trust committee to help in managing this money that has been collected, which is right now there are about 8 people that are known, who are the Sheikh al-Azhar, the head of the Azhar, the head of the Egyptian Coptic Pope, and five well-known businessmen, as well as the ministers of trade and industry and investment and urban development. That's what we know so far. Now, there are speculations as to whether it will become an investment fund or a sovereign wealth fund per se, but nothing concrete yet.
Indeed. At face value, however, it seems like what this fund sets out to do essentially overlaps with Egypt's government and what it should be doing with tax revenues that it raises from citizens and from companies as well. So what exactly is the business case, assuming there is one, for having this fund?
Well, right now Egypt is running a very large budget deficit, so the government is not able to do all the things it should be doing based on its own revenues. So this idea was an unorthodox idea, so to say, as to how to improve the Egyptian economy without putting more pressure on an already overstretched budget. The Egyptian budget deficit is about in the tune of 250 billion Egyptian pounds, which is quite a large number for this economy. There are many projects that need to be done that will not have a direct return, that will not have a short-term return, so you cannot really call it an investment fund. It has to have more community benefits and more other social benefits will have to be put into the equation, not just the monetary benefits, so to say.
Indeed, but still focusing on the benefits here, I mean, are the contributions that are being made to the fund, are they just grants or contributions at an interest or payable back with interest to the contributors through dividends, perhaps?
So far, the contributions are grants, so to say. They are contributions by Egyptians and by people who would like to see the country move forward and be in a better place than it is right now. So it is not an investment fund, as I was saying. Returns are not expected on the money that is donated to this bank account. Well, people are saying fund. Fund entails that you put money in, you get a certificate, and then you get a return on this certificate. This is not the case. This is a bank account that people are putting money in, and then a committee is going to be established to decide on how to use this money for the greater benefit of the Egyptian economy and the Egyptian people.
Indeed. Thank you very much for
your
your
time. Maybe out of that, a sovereign wealth fund will be established, but right now, not really.
Indeed. Thank you very much for your time this evening, Mr. Mofta. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there for the time being. That is Rami Mofta. He's on the board of Synergy Capital Markets, live there for us from Cairo. Now, let's talk about a story that broke sometime last week, but we've only gotten around to actually getting a lot more attention on it in the last 24 hours. The US Treasury has labelled a Tanzanian-based bank with Lebanese roots as a quote, primary money laundering concern. Now, a report from the Financial Crime Unit says FBME Bank, the first bank of the Middle East as what previously known, has been linked to what's described as many high-risk transactions, including one that involved a financier to Hezbollah. Now, that move then prompted Cyprus's central bank to take control of the bank's Cypriot branch on the 18th of July. FBME, for its part, has its nominal headquarters in Tanzania. It said it was shocked at these allegations. In a statement on its website, FBME said it welcomes the involvement of its regulator and it is cooperating, it says, fully with the authorities. The authorities also, the bank's management rather, also say they remain committed to full compliance with all applicable laws. Now, even though the bank is headquartered in Tanzania, most of its transactions are actually carried out through its Cypriot branches. Let's get you some details on exactly what's going on with FBME and why now it's in Washington's crosshairs. Daniel Rangers joins us now from the American Capitol. Daniel, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network has red flagged transactions going back to 8 years. But what exactly is it that brought this bank to the regulator's attention in the first place?
I'm not sure exactly what it is, but my guess is that over a long period they've been monitoring this bank and detecting that they've facilitated lots of suspicious transactions. And in the statement of information on this decision that they've filed, they've listed a long list of potential issues where customers have come forward from some pretty shady areas. So, for example, we have money laundering on international trafficking of drugs, wire fraud, committed even against US persons, sanctions evasions, including a Syrian entity known to be a proliferator of weapons of mass destruction. You mentioned Hezbollah's link. We've also had the facilitation of bribes involving the son of the president of Equatorial New Guinea, involving about $70 million. As well as that, the US says it's been monitoring the level of compliance of this bank over a long period and suggests that they haven't been looking at their customers and detecting issues where there were clear cases. So I think the bank itself is saying it's shocked by these allegations, as you say, and that they are fully compliant, particularly with European standards of anti-money laundering.
Indeed. However, by its own admission in that particular report, FinCEN essentially says that the lack of transparency in beneficial ownership in jurisdictions where a lot of these shell companies are based, which essentially are tax havens, makes it, and I'm quoting here, extremely difficult for US and other financial institutions involved in these transactions to verify the bona fides of all the parties to these transfers. Now, if this is the case, how exactly can a definitive evidence trail be established across these 4,500 plus transactions?
Well, when it comes to that volume of transactions, clearly even the US government doesn't have the resources to do that. But when there is a clear case in which a US entity's been involved or a US person's been involved, or where there are cases of terrorist financing or the like, then there is a clear case for investigators to go forward and look at individual transactions and try to investigate them themselves. And indeed, some cases have been brought and identified here in the United States. On top of that, we have the fact that the US is able to monitor the size of transactions and where those transactions are going from and to. And in many cases, according to the US Treasury, these have been going to jurisdictions which have very low quality of financial transparency and in themselves raise a red flag. So there is some obligation on the part of international institutions to investigate cases where that occurs. And on top of that, they also say that the firm's marketing has encouraged this kind of lack of transparency.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being, but thank you very much for that. That's CCTV's Daniel Rangers there live in Washington. We'll keep tabs on that story as it evolves. Right now, though, a quick run through the markets. Let's see what your money has been doing for you across the African bourses that we track here on Africa Live. All of them really opening on Monday in the red. Some interesting activity, however, in the NS20 share index, especially on Mumbai Sugar. Some fairly heavy trading over there. A lot of spin off some of its platinum assets in South Africa. We'll be live in London and Johannesburg with the details. Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies.
From small businesses to large-scale enterprises, hear directly from entrepreneurs behind the story. It's about putting you in the picture so you know where Africa fits in the global context.
Global Business, weekdays at this time on CCTV Africa.
Zambia is a hidden gem, soon to make its shining debut on the global tourist circuit. It successfully hosted the UN World Tourism General Assembly in 2013 and is expecting the exposure to shoot their previously slow-growing tourist earning numbers far beyond the 2010 mark of $148 million.
Welcome back. The world's top platinum producer, Anglo American Platinum, is now, for lack of a better word, out of love with the commodity. It now plans to dispose some of its South African operations following years of industrial action, the latest of which was a 5-month-long strike by AMCU. Now, the company intends to sell 3 of its Rustenburg operations and the Pandora joint venture. It will, however, retain the Mogalakwena open cast mine. It's the company's largest, 3 other operations and 4 stakes in other joint ventures. The company's first half profits nosedived by 88%. The firm said it had lost over 420,000 ounces in platinum outputs in the strike by the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union. Let's dig deep into this story. Angelo Coppola is in Johannesburg. Miriam Bemard is live for us tonight in London. Thank you both for your time. Angelo, let's start with you. How much are these assets, the Union Mine and the Amplat assets in Rustenburg, collectively, how much are they worth?
Well, Raman, it's unclear at this stage, but what I did do this afternoon is I went and looked through the financials to kind of get a sense of how much they contribute to the actual total income or otherwise. And it's not surprising that 7 of the 12 operations that they report on are contributing in a negative manner. No surprise that the 5 that aren't in negative territory are the ones that Anglo Platinum are holding on to. But we must also be a little cautious here because CEO Chris Griffiths did say that this is not going to be a fire sale. So he's probably putting a message out to the market and the suitors out there that they shouldn't just put an offer on the table for the sake of it. There is an option that Griffiths did also mention, just while we're talking about that, of listing these assets or these mines or the shafts individually. He did say it's not their preferred option, which probably indicates that they don't have an appetite to hold on to those assets. The single mine assets or the single shafts are attractive to individual buyers, but again, the suitors need to have an appetite, and they probably need to see a platinum price that's going to turn in the right direction and stay on a trend line. So you might see 1 or 2 buyers putting a ridiculous offer on the table. We do know that Sibanye Gold has publicly declared its interest, but that's not the same as putting an offer on the table. In terms of valuations, you know what, you can value anything at any price. It depends how you look at it, Raman.
Indeed, Mark to Infinity would certainly indulge in some jokes around here. But Mariam, as far as investors on your end are concerned, there's a lot of red ink around these assets. Is this asset sale rather a good move from your investors' perspective?
Well, you know, Rama, many investors that I spoke with and experts on this and are optimistic that a new owner could actually help revamp the mines, but it will very much likely come at the cost of operational cutbacks and some level of downsizing, although no one really wants to talk about that and it's too early to say. Investors on this end still see the mines as a lucrative and profitable avenue, although there's mixed views on the overall value, as Angela was just talking about. Some analysts are saying that the Rustenburg mines and the Union Mine could be worth anywhere between $1.5 billion to $2 billion, while others like Nomura that I spoke with and confirmed see it at a negative $800 million. There's growing expectation that South Africa's Sibanye Gold, of course, would raise about $1 billion to seal the deal. Sibanye also has Chinese investors bringing it a cheaper potential source of funding. Another Chinese-backed company, Waisui Platinum, has also said it was looking at buying further assets, particularly in this sector, but not necessarily these mines. A buyer would also get, of course, a 3-year wage agreement with AMCU and secure annual production of about 600,000 ounces, or a quarter of Amplat's capacity. So this certainly does make it a little bit more attractive.
Indeed, but Angelo, at the end of the day, this does look like a fairly poisoned chalice, for lack of a better word. Labour laws in South Africa haven't changed. Unions are still as militant as ever in the Platinum Belt, and Amplats wasn't able to effectively deal with labour unrest in that sector. So how can any potential buyer of these mines deal with that problem?
Well, Raman, some analysts would argue that it's not only AMCU that's militant, but they probably have a short memory, because the NUM were making a point late last year at Northern Mine, the single asset mine that's listed on the JSE, and they went on strike for about 7 weeks. But what's interesting is how NUM's behaving at the moment. They seem to be making themselves appear to be more reasonable. On Friday, they signed a deal with RB Plats for between 3 and 7 years. The percentages there range between 8 and 12%. And today we heard that Aquarius and the NUM had signed a 3-year deal where wage increases would range between 10 and 12%. So a potential buyer, if they're looking at the sector, might look at NUM and think they might be more amenable to an interaction. But they need to have an appetite, and they may well sign a preemptive agreement with some of these unions to kind of get them to stay on board for the period. There's also the question of whether those agreements with AMCU are actually going to hold if a new owner steps in. So the potential buyers are going to have to be quite creative there. And of course, let's remember that they can't mechanize these shafts because of the type of ore body they're in. So you may also find that a buyer may be interested in only buying the asset and not taking the staff on. It's an option that they do have. They aren't obligated to take on staff. And at that point, you'll probably find that government might intervene. Rama?
Indeed. Finally, Miriam, very quickly, what about 30 seconds on this? How exactly will Anglo-American's reduction of platinum exposure in South Africa then affect other platinum miners? After all, it is essentially the biggest fish in that pond.
Well, it's unclear at this point how Amplat's move will have a knock-on effect on other miners. The fact that Anglo-American was planning to shift its resources and focus from labor-intensive to more machinized mining poses bigger, longer-term challenges for unions and the miners. And some critics that we've spoken to argue that this move could set the tone for other miners to follow suit, barring, of course, its success. Already, Anglo is anticipating a $1 million loss from Amplat in its interim results. But Anglo has said it's working with the South African government to avoid labor cutbacks, but there's already estimates of reducing headcounts. And the longer term strategy for many miners could be to avoid their risk exposure as much as possible to uncertainties with the labor source. Whether that's feasible or not is a different story.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being. Thank you both for your time. Miriam Bemmard live in London and Angelo Coppola there live in Johannesburg. Let's make a quick run through commodities. We all like chocolate, allegedly, or something of that sort, but keep a close eye on cocoa futures. They've been running up very strongly so far this year, and because of that, especially on the futures end, you're seeing retail prices on the other end of the retail chain going up. Hershey's last week just raised prices on some of the output that they do have, and the main reason for that is right on your screen. Cocoa prices are heading north. Global Business continues. When we come back, we'll be looking at 2 young entrepreneurs in Soweto. They'll be telling us how the rich history over there has inspired them to set up a fairly trendy clothing store. It's coming up next. It's 1824 GMT. You're watching Global Business Africa. Now, over the years, Soweto is South Africa's, of course, biggest township, and it has become a symbol of resistance against apartheid. Since the advent of majority rule and proper democracy in 1994, however, it has evolved into a vibrant cultural hub, and it's shaken off its rough, crime-riddled reputation. Artists, poets, young entrepreneurs, you name it, they develop over there, and two of them are using Soweto's rich history and culture as inspiration for their trendy clothing line. Sumit Chanaidu filed this report for Grassroots Tonight.
Proudly Soweto is how the young entrepreneurs behind the Theses concept store describe it. It offers a range of clothing inspired by youth trends on the streets of the township. The store was opened on the 16th of June 2007, a date synonymous with the tragic youth uprisings of 1976, in which many young people lost their lives.
We opened the store on that day because there's a lot of significance in terms of the youth in South Africa, and we believe that what we were doing was really trying to inspire the youth and move away from, the struggle days, We've got a new struggle, which is like an economic struggle.
The layout and design of the store is a reminder of its unique location. The look and feel put together by a team of local designers, photographers and poets. The decor all created by South Africans.
The shack is more inspired like the shacks in the hood, but we're trying to put the shack inside the cool store. So it's like, it still represents the township. The barbed wire is like, we were always blocked off using the barbed wire back in the day during apartheid.
Zondo says the idea of the Theses store is to tell the story of Soweto through fashion.
This store has been open for 7 years now. The entire clothing line has been designed and manufactured locally, and demand is still growing. It just seems that the youth are looking for apparel that identifies more with their own street culture as opposed to Western fashion. This township style hat, for instance, is one of the biggest sellers in the store. Between 250 and 300 are made and sold every week.
I came here from Frostloras to Soweto to buy some hats of Theses. I just saw the hats, in fact the label in the internet. So that's why I like the pics and even the hats, even the clothes, everything.
I actually came here because I love their designs, the street culture that they represent, and that's the township life that we actually have here.
The Theses concept store is also trying to empower young people in the community by creating an employment chain. Talent Rabatata designs and produces the popular hats sold at the store.
I've been almost in this business for 12 years, but when Theses came around, that's when I saw that I've got more talent than what I had. And I can now live.
The store hosts social jam sessions once a month. It will also be opening a health cafe soon. There are no plans to commercialize the brand just yet, but Theses is planning to expand in townships across the country over the next 5 years. Sumitra Naidu, CCTV, Soweto, South Africa.
Let's make a quick run through the Forex here for you. Focus particularly, however, on the Ghanaian cedi. Later this month, Ghana will be borrowing about $1.5 billion from the markets, and that might provide a bit of a boost for the Ghanaian cedi. Whether or not that actually happens, of course, is an entirely different matter altogether. Yields on domestic debt, however, are way up north, all the way to about 24%, give or take, on some short-term paper. We'll keep tabs on Ghana's fiscal health here for you on Global Business. But that's it for this edition of the program. Send us your feedback. globalbusinessafrica@cctv.com is the email to use. Wherever you are on social media, Facebook, Twitter, we're there. We'll provide the news there 24/7. We'll see you over there. Thank you for watching. I'm Mark.